So we're gonna have Dan Mead go first, and then Mark Eckler's gonna follow him. They've never been on a Wales trip before, so we thought we'd give the most time to them, and then Brian and I will close up with the totals and stuff for the week.
I guess I drew the short straw. I get to go first, which is probably good because I'm going to take up a significant amount of time, and hopefully I'll leave enough for them. So let's get started. Maybe. Well, the first picture anyways, I can get started, is a picture of the airport, in Lima. And it was early morning when we landed, and we had a few hours to kill, so I thought that I would go to Dunkin' Donuts and get some coffee. And this was really my first encounter with the language barrier that I would be seeing. And when I ordered my coffee, I saw a sign that said $2, and I thought, oh, I wonder if this is $2 in American money. So I said, $2 American? You know, and I'm trying to talk English, Spanish, and it didn't really work. She nodded, and evidently I ordered 2 cups of coffee, and it wasn't $2. So Mark got the free cup of coffee. So when we arrived in Pura, we had a huge welcome at the airport from the church of at Catacaos. Yeah. And after we got shuttled to the hotel, we had lunch, and then later afternoon, we went to the church, and we had another big welcome there, and it was a huge welcome, and it was a surprise, and it was a good time. That was the distribution center that we were at, and we were able to go and organize our tools the first day and the chairs. After that, we got to meet Hearts United, and that was the organizations that partnered with Johnny and Friends, and they also we got to play an icebreaker game, and I got to talk to a lady about the ministry that she would do at her church, and a lot of it was ministries that we do here as well, and I thought that was very interesting. On Sunday, we got to enjoy worship at the church, and it was a great time. I almost asked to sing How Great Thou Art because they sang that song, and I was going to see if we could all sing it in Spanish, but I didn't. But it was great to just be there with the culture and be a part of that worship service. And the picture here is the picture of Hearts United, and I believe their name in Spanish is Corazones Unidos. Close. Okay, close. All right, we'll just stick with Hearts United. And this is a picture of them. We also got a picture with us, and we were able to distribute the first wheelchair on that day. After the service, we had lunch, and then we were doing some more setup, and I got to fix my first chair, and this is my first chair, and I took off the arm of one chair, and I cut them up and made them fit to this chair, and that was my first chair. By the end of the day, I was tired, but I was excited to begin our ministry on Monday. However, I woke up around 3 a.m. with a very bad chest cold and congestion, and this really came out of nowhere. I wasn't feeling ill the night before, and there were no signs of me being sick. Needless to say, I did not sleep. I was worried. I was wondering what's going to happen. Am I going to be sick when I go to do the ministry? So I did a lot of praying, and John 10:10 came to my mind, and that says, "The thief only comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I came to give you life and give it abundantly." And I resolved that Satan would not win this battle, would not steal, kill, or destroy my joy and the opportunity that I had. So Monday morning, got up and we went, and that is the waiting area, and they would come in and they would sit there and wait to be pulled in to receive their chair. And the lady on the left there was very excited and very enthusiastic, and she did a whole lot of singing, 8 hours worth, I think. And of course, we had the dancing Bible. The picture on the right is the council area. So after they received their chair from us, they would go and into the council area, and they would hear about Jesus. Throughout the day, I was not feeling very well, but when I would see the smiles on their faces, the recipients, they received their chair, it really kept me moving. And I would work a little bit, fix a chair, and I would sit, take a break, and I would get up, and I'd work a little bit, and then take a drink a lot of water. So this would be Franco. This was my first chair recipient, and he had cerebral palsy, and I was teamed with Mary Kate, who was the therapist, and Jean, who was the support staff. And Mary Kate was great. She taught me the ropes, and I also had that first day Pastor Darwin, who was there as a mechanic and was also disabled, and he was in a wheelchair, and he taught me a lot about the wheelchairs and how they moved and how they worked and what parts came apart, and that was really good. That helped me out. By the end of the day, I was achy, and I knew I had a temperature. So after dinner, I talked with Brian and Donna. I went and talked with them, and they had a thermometer, and I took my temperature, and sure enough, I had 101 temperature and not feeling good. They also had a COVID test, so I'll take that. I went up to my room, and Mark and I prayed, which was a comfort and a joy to have Mark in my room. And so we prayed, and then I took the test, and for the next however long, 9-10 minutes, I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed. Praise the Lord, it came back negative. And that night, again, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I just couldn't sleep. I was not feeling well at all. So that was 2 nights in a row. I barely got any sleep. And on Tuesday, the team had finally heard about that I was sick, and they were great, and they made me drink lots of water. And when Tom was one of the mechanics that was with us, he came up to me, asked me how I was doing, and I told him that I was not letting Satan win this battle. This is Trey Umrah, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name, but just he had sores all over his foot and his legs, and he probably had diabetes. And when I finished fixing his chair, his wife asked me if she could get a picture of us. So we got a picture, and then I got one too. And she said whenever I looked at his picture, to pray for him. It does every time. Get you. I asked if I could pray for him, and so I did. If you can, please take like 5 seconds in your chair. We're looking at his picture. Just pray for him real quickly. Okay, we finished the day, the second day, and we had a celebration, and we were presented with gifts, and we had cake and candy, and I still feel terrible. I still felt terrible, but God was really giving me the strength to continue, persevere. At the couple people I met, Josamir, I don't know if I spelled it right, but Josamir is here on the right, and he was one of our translators, and he was a great guy. And we had some good conversations with him, and hopefully he really wants to come to the States, and hopefully someday he'll make it here and we can go fishing together. Gerald named Mark. Right. Gerald named Mark was a little boy that was there. He's 7 years old, and he loves soccer and he loves to play basketball, and I got a ton of hugs from him, as I'm sure everybody did. And when we were about to leave, he gave me a big hug and he ran to his mom and he was crying, just didn't want us to leave. So that night, again, I woke up, but this time I had severe body cramping. I was getting cramps and I had trouble rolling over and moving, and I believe I was dehydrated as well, even though I was drinking a lot of water. It's not replenishing my electrolytes, and so I was getting dehydrated. I also felt my stomach was a little bit off. On Wednesday was a travel day. We had about a 5-hour drive, a 6-hour drive, and it was a bus ride to Tumbes, and I didn't mind at all. I got a chance to sleep. I think I even told Brian, I can't wait for this bus trip because I can get some sleep. So I think I woke up a couple times. One time was go to the bathroom when we stopped, and the other time was we stopped at the beach, and we were able to go, and this is my first look at the Pacific Ocean. I've never been there, and we got some. This slide is the slide of the distribution center. It's an outdoor church, and it was very big. They would have about 1,000 attendants to their church service. And that was, after we arrived, went there to organize our tour again and set up. After that, we went back to the hotel, had dinner, and that night I still had stomach issues. And again, I woke up with body cramping again. The next day, the next morning, Thursday morning, I had devotions, and I did my devotions on Luke 14, 24 through 33, and it was on counting the cost. Are we prepared for ministry, and are we prepared to accept what it might cost to do our ministry? And I kind of felt like I was living my devotional. It was going through all the sickness and not feeling. Tell you that it counted the cost, and I was okay with it. And after my devotional, I started to feel better. And by lunchtime, I had my appetite back, didn't have stomach issues, and by the afternoon, I felt. So Thursday morning, when we got to the distribution center, this is Marcelina, and she was my first recipient, Tumbes. And when our recipients would come in, we would pray with them, and then Mary Kate would ask them a whole bunch of questions, and we would tell them, okay, we're going to pray for you, and then we would pray for that we would find the perfect chair for them. And then after they received the chair, we would get together again. We would pray. The chair would help. Better quality. This is Lucas, and he had no chair, and all he did was sit on his mom's lap, and she would have to carry him around everywhere, and always sitting on the floor, or just was always being moved around. He had no mobility at all. He had a brain paralysis and also had a dislocated hip. And in this second here, he did not look too happy. That's when he first came in. But if you look over here, he's got this huge smile on his face, and he just loved the chair that he was in, and he now could move around. Mom could push him wherever, and it's difficult because a lot of them being kids and and having to be carried around, they weren't able to go outside as much, you know, because mom would have to carry them outside, carry them out and sit them down, and weren't able to do it. But with mobility, it was much easier, not just for Lucas, but for his mother. And this was our last recipient on Thursday. I can't remember his name. I was taking notes and I was writing stuff down in my phone, and I just forgot to put his name down. But he was young man. He had cerebral palsy, and he needed a chair because he was going to go to college, and he needed a good chair because his mom was going to be pushing him to all his classes each day. He wants to be an accountant in college. By the end of Thursday, I was not feeling sick at all. I definitely believe that those first days was spiritual warfare. It was like God was allowing Satan to attack me, but he didn't keep me from doing the ministry. Like the COVID test, that was positive. I would not have been allowed or able to go do it. So just feel like, you know, he was allowing it to happen. So I would get that experience and maybe see what would happen. And once my devotions were over and I started feeling well, Satan, he moved on. Because I was feeling better, and I kept saying, you're not winning this war. So Thursday night, I was very worried because I thought, you know, I wasn't going to be able to watch the Bills game. And but I found some friends, some Bills Mafia buddies. That's Darwin in the middle. Pastor Darwin, he was the mechanic who was also in the wheelchair. And that was Daniel. He was one of our interpreters. And we came back after dinner, and I saw them sitting in the hotel, and they had the Bills game on. And so I went right in, and we sat down, and we had a blast watching the Bills game. So that was a really good time. So on Friday, I was completely back to normal, and this picture is a picture of the transformer chair. That's what I like to call it. It had a lot of moving parts in it. You would pull one bolt off or one nut off, and the whole thing would collapse and move all over the place. So it was really difficult to work with because there were so many different parts to it. So, and it took a good hour for me to fix what needed to be fixed on it and to adjust it all to the recipient who will receive it. And this is Elysian, and she was a recipient of the transformer chair, and she loved it. As you can tell by her big smiley face here, what a joy it was to see her smile when she got in that chair. It was just awesome. And she was just a joy to have and to see. And in the other over here, you can see it had a roof on it, it had a table on it, it had all kinds of parts, and she just loved it. And her mom loved it because now it would be much easier for mom to feed her and with the table and take her out. It was just great to see. This is Amaryllis, and she's 11 years old. And when she was a little bit younger, a few years younger, she began to lose function in her legs. She would be running in school, and she would just fall down. And she'd get up, and she'd start running again, and then she'd just fall down because she was losing that function in her legs. And so her mom took her to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, she is calcium deficient. Give her more calcium." So she did, and she would, but she continually got worse. kept going back to the doctor, and she did this several times. Every time they went to the doctor or another doctor, it was always calcium deficiency. But she knew it wasn't. The mom just knew it wasn't. Finally, they took her to Lima, where she was diagnosed with a degenerative disease, and she's been losing functions in her hands even now. So her legs and her hands now started losing functions, and it will only get worse for her. We got her a sporty pink chair. She's 11 years old, and so we got her a sporty pink chair. We found one, and she loved it. And this was our last recipient of the day, and actually I think of whole ministry. And this woman came in a homemade chair. See that it's a plastic lawn chair she's sitting in. The wheels are bicycle wheels, and they fashioned it so that she could sit in it, and I think there are some parts of an old wheelchair there. And the chair we fitted her for was a recliner. She had a broken hip as well, and a hip that could not be fixed, or it was dislocated. It could not be fixed, and it was easier for her to be reclined than it was to be sitting up. So it was just, it would take a lot of pain away with the recliner. So we prayed for it. We found the best chair for her, and we took that chair and we started working on it. And we worked on it, and Brian worked on it, and Tom worked on it, and everybody seemed to be pitching in to work on it and to help with this chair. And it took the longest time to work on this chair. But in the end, she got in it, saw her smile. I think she wants it. What she really wanted was a chair just like the one she was in, but I think she'll stay in this one because I think she finally understood that her pain was going away when she was able to recline in it. Hopefully she stays in it. She will. Okay. This is kind of a weird picture. It's my last slide, and I really wanted to put this picture in here. This, for all you young people out there, that is called a payphone. Okay? Yes, it's called a payphone, and the reason why I took that picture and I saw that in the airport, and the reason why I took that picture is because that kind of speaks of Peru. They seem to be stuck back earlier days. They haven't quite caught up, you know, and just looking at the housing and the way they live and everything, it just seems like they haven't caught up to the times, I guess. And I don't know if they ever use that phone. It's probably just there because they have cell phones. But yeah, that just reminded me of Peru and the condition of the country. That is their electrical system. If you can see it real well, there's just a whole bunch of wires coming in and going, and who knows, it's a mess. But along the lines of Peru, that to me was a great depiction of Peru. I got to sit with a gentleman flying from Piura back to Lima on our way out, and I had a great conversation with him for an hour and a half, whatever, the hour that we were. And he was telling me he used to live in America, and he decided to go back to Peru because it was doing so well. But when he got back, all of a sudden things started to go bad, and politically it is just a mess. He was telling me that he spoke of, he talked about the corruption in government, the corruption of the president and the president's family. Evidently, the brother was going to be going to jail, and the wife possibly, but he was saying that most likely the president wouldn't be, even though the president was very corrupt, wouldn't be because he was paying off those in their Senate. And so that picture of those wires is the mess, really, that Peru is in now. John 10:10, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. And Satan is working hard in Peru, and he tried to do that to me. But Jesus said, I came to give you life and give it abundantly. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to go and to get the full experience. I would not change a single thing about it, and Lord willing, I'll be going again.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Eckler. Interesting. I didn't know a lot of that stuff. I didn't know any of the people that chairs that he worked on because I was working on other chairs and other people's stuff. So it's interesting. You go this way and then you come back the other way and you don't even know where you are because you see things from a different view. And that's how it is when you go. A lot of times you just don't see things the same way as other people did because it's just a different situation. But arrow for there's one on the right. Read it right. Over. Point that way. Oh. Hey. Just learned something, how to hold a remote. All right. All right, let's go back there. This is how every mission trip should start. It should start way, way, way before you go on a mission trip. I'm not saying you shouldn't go on a mission trip as a newborn Christian, but it is going to be different. And I think in a lot of ways it would be good for a newborn to go on a mission trip like that. But nonetheless, you need to be founded in the Word because, as Ann said, Satan's going to try you. That was my faithful friend, faithfully reading his Bible. This is my first look at Peru, and it was in Lima. And if you look in the background above the plains, it's pretty much gray and overcast. Pardon me. And I thought, oh, Peru, okay. Well, we went to Piura, and if you look over the airport building there, it's blue and it's sunny, and it was really nice. It was like 70 degrees, and there's people wearing down jackets. I'm like, it's 70 degrees. You know, what are you baking yourself or what? You know, I didn't really understand it, but I didn't really understand Peru itself in a lot of ways. Peru is a desert country, which you'll see a little bit later. But when I say desert, I mean desert, like as in a Louis L'Amour book, or like in a John Wayne Western, you know, The Searchers or something like that. Rock outcroppings and little creosote bushes and sand everywhere. And I just didn't realize that. So I'm like, this is really cool because I have never really been to the desert and I'd always wanted to go. And it was a real blessing. I sat in that plane and I just watched miles and miles and miles and miles of desert go past me. And I'm like, this is kind of neat. This was our first motel, and it was a motel with a good coffee. And it was tasty coffee, and it was a rather plain Jane motel. It was just a block wall, room, and they had tables out, and they just laid them down, and we sat there at the table. They brought us out, papaya juice, papaya juice, and, I tried it, and I'm diabetic, so I tried not to try too much stuff, and I was actually a pretty good boy for most of the time. But there are issues in Peru because Peru, they basically have chicken, beef, rice, and potatoes. And that's it. And quite often you have chicken and rice and potatoes, or you have beef and rice and potatoes. But whether you have chicken or beef, you're going to have rice and potatoes, one or the other. Okay, it's pretty much the way it is. One of the problems with that is that there's a lot of people that are diabetic. I think I counted almost 5 to 6 guys. Their legs were gone, and they were getting a wheelchair because they'd lost their legs due to diabetes. Now, I don't know if they realized it was due to diabetes, but I'm sure somebody told some people at some point, and yet they still have papas fritas or French fries and rice on a regular basis. And maybe not for breakfast, but lunch and dinner. Breakfast and then lunch and dinner is going to have something like that. So that is one of the issues with the people there. They do have, I would imagine they have a higher than average diabetic population because of the diet. But I really enjoyed this motel. The girl that was working there was going to school to become, I believe it was a nurse, or a nurse practitioner or therapist, something like that. I wasn't quite sure what Sylvia said because the way she was going to school, and then she came in, she waited on us on the table and stuff. She was very pleasant, and I, in one way thoughtfully and in another way thoughtlessly, invited her to come and sit with us, hoping she'd come and sit down and tell us what her life was like and stuff like that. But she brought her breakfast and ate, and I didn't realize that she spoke very little English. So it was kind of awkward in one sense, but it was, somebody told me later, Mark, that was nice that you invited her. Well, I'm not sure it was because it kind of was awkward for her. So there's definitely a problem with a language barrier. But you'll see some other stuff in a little bit. But this place, they had regular coffee, and it was good coffee. It was coffee I enjoyed. And since I've had COVID, whenever long ago, I had it. Coffee tastes good to me about every 15th or 20th cup. And then a lot of the coffee, it's just like the kick in the pants, and that's what I get it for. But I like a good cup of coffee, and this was pretty good coffee. So I was very glad for that. That says 12th grade Spanish. This was the first Sunday we were there. We went to the place where the distribution for the chairs was to take place, and we went for the service. We met the people, and Dan showed you the pictures with all the people. Welcome, Johnny and friends, brother missionaries, blah, blah, blah. First of all, these people they're full of pepper. If you're going to sing, you're going to sing. If you're going to pray, you're going to pray, and you're going to pray till everybody else is praying along with you, maybe to get you to stop praying or whatever, but you're going to pray. It's invigorating in a lot of ways because when they sing, they really sing. They get into it. So, 12th grade Spanish. I took Spanish in 11th and 12th grade in high school. That was in the 70s. That was in the mid-70s. Okay, so that's a lot longer than some of you are alive. So that's a long time ago. But the one thing I have been able to retain about Spanish is I could remember how to pronounce the words. I didn't know what the word meant. I didn't know where it should go in connection with the rest of all the vocabulary. I didn't know any of the grammar because I was a lousy Spanish student, but I could pronounce the words. And we sang How Great Thou Art. I'm like, that's pretty cool. I can sing along in this Spanish country where everybody else except Dan and me and possibly Brian are not singing Spanish, and we can still sing the song. So I'm like, that was really cool. And I'm like, thank you, Lord. That I really enjoyed that. And then they had another song, and it was something Amor a Corazones. I'm like, love and heart. I know amor is love and heart. And I started reading the words in Spanish. And this is not very far off a miracle, folks. I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, yeah, with love we, oh, you know, and I'm reading this and I'm getting a good part of this song from 12th grade Spanish in a foreign country that I haven't spoken Spanish in since Who Flung the Chunk. I never speak Spanish. You know, maybe si, you know, or buenos dias, how's that, okay? So, I'm in a foreign country, never been in this country before, I've been in other countries before, singing Haiti, they're as bad or worse than the Peruvians, they go wild, but I didn't know what they were singing, so I couldn't sing along in that. But in Peru, I sang along, and I sang along in Spanish, and it was a real blessing. I don't know exactly what I was singing. How many of you read your Bible and know exactly what you're reading? None of you do. Not all the time. There may be some times when you know precisely what you're reading. But there's a lot of times when you're reading Paul and you're like, I don't know what the heck he's talking about. And I did that in Peru. I was able to sing in Spanish and I really enjoyed it. This is the crew. I'm in red. The lady in front is Jen. She was my therapist. Thank you. I was going to say trainee. I'm like, no, I was a trainee. She was a therapist, and I knew I was a newbie because she was verbally caressing me to calm me. She'd say stuff like, oh, this is why I love mechanics, you know, because they're so blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I haven't even touched a chair yet, you know, but we got along. I learned to just listen, and if I really had a positive to add to it, I'd kind of push my way in there and say, listen, I think you might want to consider this. And a couple of times she took me up on it. She's like, that was a good idea. But for the most part, she had a very specific idea what she wanted, and then I did the best I could with it. This was our room in Kira, and this was the place with the good coffee. If you look at that, that's not exactly roughing it. I do camping that's a lot worse than that. Okay, so it was nice. You had a shower. I've been on trips where you didn't have a shower. There were some of the issues of a third world country like they were. I am in the habit of rinsing out my mouth when I'm in the shower. Big mistake in overseas countries, and I did that once, and then I'm like, I shouldn't have done that, because they keep telling me, don't drink any water, don't get any water in your mouth, and I'm like, well, Lord, if I get sick, so be it. And I said, if you want me to stay healthy, keep me healthy. My roommate had pretend COVID. So I don't know if he's just looking for sympathy or what, but you know, 101 temperature, and realistically, like Dan said, if he'd come positive, it wouldn't have been Dan sitting up in the room by himself. It would have been Dan and me throttling each other for 10 days because we'd be locked up in a room together because we wouldn't have been able to do anything. God really provided, and God really protected, because there is nothing that says that we couldn't have come down with COVID and there would have been 2 down, not 1. And I'm not sure how far they would have carried that on with the rest of the team, because you'd go out in public in Peru, and in certain activities in the park, they might not have their masks on. You'd see some families with no masks, and then you'd see other people, and they wear their masks all the time. And I would say that they are much more mask sensitive and wear their mask much more often than we do here. So it is an issue with them. So if Dan had come down with COVID, it would have been an issue. Now I can read it. No speaky Ingy. This is Jose. I met like 4 Jose's. So I don't know if they just say, yeah, my name's Jose, so that I can pronounce Jose. You know, maybe their name is Ikegwanu, and I don't know that, but they know darn well I can't pronounce Ikegwanu. So they say, my name's Jose. But Jose was a great guy. I didn't speak Spanish. He didn't speak English. I spoke some words in Spanish, and he spoke some very few words in English. And we got along like peanut butter and jelly. I'd go up and I'd say, I need this, you know, and it needs to be at a obtuse angle, so it's like, and he'd make it. And I don't know how he understood it. And he was just awesome. One of the things that I have already decided, I decided this like 3rd day in Piura, or the 3rd day of the trip, and I'm like, I'm bringing gifts for the other workers next time. And one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to bring one of my many multi-tools, and I'm just going to give it away. If I could have, I would have given one to Jose, but I needed it for some of the stuff I did. And in heaven, it won't matter who speaks English and who speaks Spanish, because Jose and I will get along just marvelously. And it was a real blessing. I saw him at the beginning of the trip, and I saw him at the end of the trip, and it was like old friends meeting. I really enjoyed his company. I'd be surprised if this dog is still with us. We saw this dog at where we stopped at the beach. We stopped at a beach on the way, the day that Dan was sleeping, his face against the back of the seat, and he had one of those little pillow things, and he's sleeping with his face against the seat the whole way, and everybody just like let him sleep. But we got out and we got a picture, and there's a picture of this dog, and this will come up later. I'd be surprised if this dog was still with us. Matt, can you read that caption, please? Should have probably held it longer, okay? We had a lady come into our group, and this was one time where I just flat out inserted myself into the conversation, and there was no way they were going to get me out of it. This lady came in. She was probably 70, 65, 70, I don't know. So she was a youngster since I'm 64. She was an older lady. She had a nice dress on that if she'd been standing in the chair that they were trying her out in, the dress, because she sat down, This chair, when she got the chair, the feet went out like this. Okay? So Jen, the therapist, kept putting her feet on a thing like this, and the lady can't move both her legs very well. So if she moves one foot, I'll be as discreet as possible. She didn't want people looking up her dress. Okay? So every time, so I kept saying, every time you move her feet, it's pulling her dress up. And after a while, they finally listened to me and they got the point. And I'm like, if you're going to move her feet, be careful how you do it, because this is, you understand the situation, okay? So I'm looking at this and it looks relatively straightforward. It doesn't look too bad, although they're sticking out like this. They're not supposed to do that unless it's some specially made chair. So I went over and I got Reed, the lead mechanic. I thought, you know, I better get some help with this just in case. That's what the lead mechanic and I came up with. Actually, I went to Brian, because Brian has fixed like every tool I've ever had, probably, and he does very well at stuff like this. And Reed and I were like, we're not even like, why is it going like that? And so my point was, brought Brian in, Brian got it squared away, but this happened sometime. That was the result of my work. Brian came along and fixed it. So you can give him that. How do I start this video? Well, the first thing you can tell by this is I'm a great photographer. I'm really good at it, as you can tell. Okay. Okay, never mind. Probably the biggest thing that God taught me is that I love dogs more than people. It's not supposed to be that way. I can get along with virtually any dog. I guess I smell like beef jerky or hot dogs or something. But you can ask people, dogs like me. And I saw that dog at the beach, the one that I think is no longer with us. And that really bothered me for a couple hours afterwards. And here I'm working with guys who have no legs. They have no legs above their knees. And that didn't affect me nearly as much as a stupid dog. If you go on one of these trips and it doesn't affect you in some regard, then you're probably not reading your Bible enough. And you should consider that. I would say that if you are going to go on one of these trips, leave your eyes wide open. He sees A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He sees blue, green, yellow, red, quantify or qualify how God is going to work with you. If you leave your heart open and you do what you're supposed to, read your Bible every day, pray every day, and then just go about and try to bless others, He's going to use you. Real quickly, this one. That's a pipeline. Thank you. That's a pipeline in the background, and that's desert. That's creosote, and that's desert for miles and miles and miles. And then we came into Tumbes, and they have miles and miles and miles of rice paddies. Desert rice paddies. Where in the world are they getting the water from? Maybe it's from that pipeline. But Peru is enough of a, I don't want to say backwater, but it's enough of a depressed country that that could be water, it could be propane, it could be gas, it could be diesel. You have no idea what it could be. But I guess I'll leave it at there. Probably one thing I'd say is I hope to do this with my wife sometime. She's working for Mr. Mullen right now, and it's a blessing that she is working for Aaron. But at some point in time, I'm going to say, Aaron, my wife take 7 days off because we're going to Swaziland or whatever. That's mine.
We just have a couple of quick slides to wrap everything up. This is all of us traveling. In Peru, we had to double mask a lot. So bottom middle is how you double mask while you're on a plane.
It works. Works great. It's cover your eyes.
That's Dan sleeping up on the bus ride, healing himself. The bottom right-hand corner is that the van we took to Tumbes? Yeah. We thought we were going to have a bigger bus. There was 13 of us on the whole team, plus a translator. We thought we had a bigger bus going up, but we didn't, so they piled all the luggage up on top, and that worked most of the time. One time it didn't. The van we were in, the door didn't shut properly in the back, and the guy took off, and our luggage was in the street, and it's always an adventure.
Luckily, I was in the back trying to hold all the stuff down, and they wouldn't let me ride on top. I figured I'd just ride back there like a dog in a window. Luckily, I didn't, because I would have been out on the road.
Want to go over these? This is the numbers for the week. Usually, the numbers are a little bit low on the wheelchairs that were given out because we did have that one travel day in the middle. Usually we do a distribution for 5 days, but with the distribution sites being 6 hours apart, you have that one travel day, so you end up losing actually a distribution day. So we did 115 adult wheelchairs, 20 pediatric chairs, 6 walkers, 5 crutches and 6 canes, 113 Johnny books were given out, and 110 Bibles were given out to recipients and families. Altogether, in the 4 days of distribution, we had 187 people heard the gospel. The first church we were at, a lot of them were churched people already, so we didn't have quite as many accept Christ in the first church that we were at. For the whole week, recipients and families, we had 127 people accept Christ.
That's a neat, interesting the hand thing it's the wordless book. Kind of neat, little pom-poms. Go back one. The Bible, like Dan was saying, the lady there, she was a firecracker. She was a riot. But they, over the 2 days that we were there, they had the Bible, chicken,
A chicken and a bear.
And a clown. I mean, and they were all just dancing around all day long and singing. It was amazing. I don't know how she kept it up.
This is the people down in the front, of course, with the blue shirts on, was the team that came from the United States. Everybody else in the white and the other ones were, people at the church. I think the first church we were at, there was 4 churches that were actually represented there. And I think these recipients that accepted Christ will have a wonderful follow-up. I mean, they will have a church that, will follow up with them and bring them in and really, grow them in Christ.
As a gift, they gave us, you'll see a little, everybody's holding a little wallet. We, Don and I's are back there, they gave us all little coin wallets. Pretty neat, they embossed our name on it.
Just a couple, the lady in the middle, she was our oldest recipient. She received a chair, she was 103. The next day was her birthday, and she was turning 104. So, it was a birthday gift to her, I guess. The one on the upper right, Pastor Darwin, Dan had spoke about him a little bit. He was paralyzed when he was 14 in an automobile accident. This child, the boy that he's talking to there, was 14. He had came in because he wanted a walker. He was sure he wanted a walker, didn't want a wheelchair. It wasn't going to be any good for him. He was very unsafe with the walker. So we put him in a wheelchair. But Pastor Darwin came along beside him and said, you know, when I was your age, and he worked with him and got him using the chair and explained to him how much more freedom he's going to have out in town with his friends, you know, with a walker. Pastor Darwin was really a blessing to have there. Him and his friend Dan actually came down from Ecuador to be at the outreach. And the guy that was with him that came down with him was actually from Dunkirk, New York. Was a missionary down there. More pictures of the outreach. Jose was a wonderful, I don't know, tailor.
One of the things that we really wanted to bring out, we didn't have a whole lot that we wanted to say. We wanted these guys to take up as much time as they could. But the biggest thing that I got out of this trip was seeing these 2 guys grow and see the joy in their faces. When Dan did his first wheelchair, the photojournalist that took pictures of everybody and all the things came over to Daldana. She says, Dan just finished his wheelchair, and I was taking his picture, and his eyes were leaking. That's what the whole thing is about. And Mark did the same thing. I know he was worried he wasn't going to be able to do it, or what he was going to be able to do. He did great. It was fantastic to watch these guys grow, and everybody worked as a team. And you always worry about that when you get all these people from all around the country that you have no idea how, everybody works differently. It's awesome to see God put it all together and gel. And that's what's so cool. And this was hard for Donna and I. This was our first trip solo of leading the trip. So, I mean, we had a few bumps in the road here and there, but I mean, all in all, it was a great first trip for us.
Okay, this is a video that they put together. The first church that we were at put this video together, and it was sent to us. And it just kind of sums up the whole distribution, really. We just want to thank you for all your support. The video's almost 4 minutes long. For your support and prayers for this trip. I mean, it was an amazing trip. Where we go from here, we're waiting to hear from Johnny and friends. They're getting their budgets together for next year to see what's available. And we'll just leave it in God's hands.
We're hoping to, if we can, like to try to get a host of everybody from our area, church, stuff like that, the people we know, and we want to take our own group there.
Take our own team from this area.
One of our cool challenges on this trip in Tumbes was that we didn't realize it, but the governor and all of their sidekicks came, and we had to go and talk with them and everything like that. But what's cool is that we ended up in the end flipping a shirt onto him and got pictures of him and everything with it. So it was pretty neat. And at the end, they gave our team these little characters back